a third time.
The question is that the motion be agreed to. The Honourable Clayton Cosgrove.
Mr Speaker, as Shane Jones said, the Minister heads up a unique alumni of Ministers of Building and Construction, both present and past, along with Mr Jones and myself and the Minister, Mr Williamson. I think, I can't recall, I'm sure Mr Williamson might, when we were in government, how many Ministers of Building and Construction there were. There were a few. And I'd have to say from the outset that the intent, I think, of all those ministers from both sides was to try and solve a series of difficult problems, particularly, as the Minister says, the weathertight homes issue, which was visited on us for a variety of reasons. And I accept the Minister's thesis in part that it was a variety of reasons and a variety of contributing factors. I would, though, mention one in sort of, as it sort of latticed together those factors, and that was, in the old days, possibly well before some of us were here, we had things called apprenticeships, and we had a building regime that generally, and many of our state houses are sort of, still living testaments to it. You could fire a howitzer at some of them, and though they were pre-insulation and though they're a bit drafty, they still stand up to most things today. But many of our houses throughout our history were built on a handshake. And builders and construction folk came back if there was a problem and fixed it. They were constructed well, and those builders were trained in a thing called an apprenticeship. And before I entered this Parliament, and I remember as Minister making a couple of points to then the Honourable Dr Lockwood Smith, who at the time, I think it was 19, or Right Honourable, I was going to say Sir, but I presume that's yet to come. Oh yes, sir, that's right, of course, I apologise. The Right Honourable Sir Dr Lockwood Smith, I hope I've got it in, and Honourable somewhere in there, yeah, Bistro and Bar. But he, I think it was 1995, as I think Tertiary Education Minister, abolished a thing called the Apprenticeship Act, in the vain hope that the sort of market would sort it out and people would sort of, go and get the skills and those sorts of things. And I recall when I originally, and Shane Jones, took and launched the licensing building practitioners regime, the hope I think we had was once we transitioned those builders who had appropriate skill level, may not have had the trade cert or an apprenticeship, but did have a very good track record of building. Once they were sort of through it, I think the hope we had was we could almost turn the clock back and say to the 15-year-old at high school, son, or if you want to be a builder, you have to get a thing called an apprenticeship. And that's why we reintroduced the modern apprenticeship scheme. Because the Minister is right, you could strap on a tool belt, call yourself a builder and do anything. But I think that was a contributing factor. In the old days, people were trained through a 3 to 4 year apprenticeship, and they knew what they were doing. Now, sir, though we support the review process in respect of the Building Act, we find ourselves on this side of the House unable to support the bill. And I say to the Minister, he made a couple of comments to Andrew Williams, I think it was, well, we had 18 inspections, we had council inspectors running around the place and take weathertight building homes. They didn't get it right, and we still have the problem. Now, I've got to say I agree with the Minister to a certain extent, because I remember going to a number of local authorities as Building and Construction Minister and actually talking to some of the building inspectors, and on one occasion they said, oh, we stopped the, quote, drive-by inspections only a couple of years ago. I said, what do you mean drive-by? And they said, well, to be honest, the pressure was on us so much that we just sort of drove by and waved at the building and then signed it off. Now, to be fair, though, the answer, in my view, contrary to the Minister's, is less scrutiny doesn't reduce the risk. What I think should have happened, and what we did do, because we started to accredit councils to make sure that building inspectors actually had the knowledge. There's the old joke, the building inspector's the failed builder. Not always. But to ensure that building inspectors and local authorities, one, had the skills to actually inspect and check, and if it wasn't up to scratch, require change, and not drive by the house and go, yep, it's all done, and never even look, because it might have been their mates, or they were under pressure, or they didn't have the resources. We started accreditation of councils. So I don't agree with the Minister that, less inspection, less scrutiny means less risk. appropriate scrutiny by trained people who actually do the damn job can actually mean less risk. Because it used to be, again, go back many years, that the last line of defence for the homeowner was the building inspector from the council that would come in and make sure the bits joined together and tick off those items. And I suppose the thing that concerns us is that this bill seems to be a sort of piecemeal approach. I mean, I agree with the sentiment of the Minister, which says, you know, in theory, low risk, we should be able to get on with it without a lot of bureaucracy. I mean, if you want to build the outhouse outside, well, okay, maybe. But I still don't really get from the Minister, and I still think the definitions of what is low risk, is too loose and has not been adequately defined. I mean, you could make an argument that, you know, fitting your hot water cylinders, pretty standard, pretty low risk, whatever, constructing that. Well, if she blows, it causes a heck of a lot of damage. So it's very easy, and I think, you know, very politically popular to say, look, low risk, we're just going to flick it through, minimal scrutiny, it's not going to affect the envelope of the house, it doesn't matter, just where you go and do it. I think there needs to be a more holistic approach to this, a far more holistic approach, where all these facets are looked at. And I say again, you know, reducing, I don't understand the logic of less inspection means less risk. Appropriate levels of inspection by skilled and appropriate inspectors or professionals who can call to account the person who has constructed or done the work generally means, and make them fix it or do it appropriately, generally means a higher degree of confidence for the homeowner. So I say in concluding that though I accept that every Minister of Building and Construction has under duress from time to time, often from the odd CEO and senior official, I might add, some no longer with us, has had the best intentions to try and get this right, this I don't think is the way to go, and there should be more scrutiny, and there should be an overarching regime, not a piecemeal, sort of uncoordinated approach. So we will not support this bill. We support the sentiment, and we look forward to the day when the government will take this issue a tad more seriously, because the truth is, as we all know, certainly brought home to us in Christchurch and Canterbury, but for natural reasons, if you will, called an earthquake, that the biggest asset people have generally, or the biggest transaction people will have in their lives, is the purchase of a home. And if there is anything good to come out of the leaky homes fiasco, and even sadly the earthquake in terms of home scrutiny, I think those of us who purchase property or who look to purchase property, sir, understand that just like most people take their car when they buy a second-hand car to the AA and say, is it a dunger or is it not, is it okay, is it worth the money, but we had this mind block that we wouldn't do it with a house, that most people now, and it's germane to the day in the Christchurch Press actually, will have a professional look at the home very closely to check the work, to ensure that the asset they buy and the hundreds of thousands of dollars that they outlay of their own money is well worth it, and they're not buying a dunger. Not buying a dunger, sir. I finish on this. If you look at construction, I just digress for a short point, and that is you look at the Fletcher project management in Christchurch, the legalised monopoly, it is astounding that with the accreditation system and other things in place, that we find that 1 in 3 house repairs executed by Fletcher's EQR is a dunger. And I think even with all that, and even with the monopoly and the regime that the government set up, to have those figures, 1 in 3 a dunger, is not acceptable, especially to those who have had their lives torn apart by an earthquake.
Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Phil Heatley.
Speaker, I rise to support the